readings from the Old and New Testament in order to build up our life as that of a disciple of Christ, as that of a consecrated person. Indeed, there are so many aspects that our life can be looked at, so many facets that we, whatever we do or say, must truly think about what we are doing or what we are saying. In the first reading from the book of Sirach, we have heard some suggestions which come both very common in the wisdom literature, but in fact even from the Deuteronomistic author. The teaching of a father to one's son that he should learn how to go about in his life. And how is this life going to be decided upon? There is only one way. What does God tell us? What does God tell us? God has put in front of us good, so that we choose it against evil. God has put in front of us life, so that we choose it against death. Is that how we reflect upon doing or saying something? This is very important because, as I said earlier, anything that we do or say can be reflected upon, discerned according to this principle. What does God say about this? How does God expect me to behave in regard to this action? It is in a similar manner that even Paul, writing to the Corinthians, projects Jesus as the wisdom of God the Father, referring to those sections of the wisdom literature where wisdom is seen at work from the very beginning of creation by God's side, by Yahweh's side. He tells us that Jesus is that wisdom that God worked with. Whatever God created, it was done with Jesus, the Son of God, and in function of his eventual life on earth. Even creation, as we find commented by very many authors, both Jews and Christians, in the creation of human beings, it's already projected what the Son of God, the Word of God, the wisdom of God will incarnate himself into. So this wisdom of God, Paul tells us, is the one that inspires us, once again, to do good, to choose life. And it is only through him that we can hear what no ear has heard, and see what no eyes has heard. It is thanks to Jesus' fullness of revelation that we now come to understand what has been God's plan from the very beginning of creation. What is the plan that we, as His disciples, must do according? And here now we come to the section of the Gospel where this plan is revealed, as I mentioned, from the section on the Beatitude, which we heard a couple of weeks ago, and then the light of the world and the salt of the earth, that we heard last Sunday, down to these four, but I tell you of today, and the two which will remain for next Sunday. Where is the difference between simply following the commandments, as the Jews, and in particular the Pharisees, were very keen in advocating and also in boasting about doing? They were saying that they were following all the 613 rules that are found in the books of Pentateuch. And the difference with what Jesus says, beyond that interpretation, beyond that understanding. And it's in that other passage where Jesus, the answer is in the passage where Jesus said, well, there is only one commandment, that is love. Loving God and loving one's neighbor. And it goes into details. Today we have heard these four situations: killing, divorcing, in fact it's split into two, divorcing and also writing a ritual of this divorce, of dismissal, and swearing. In each of these situations, we may see that we may be following God's commandments as we found them in the books of Leviticus and Numbers, but in fact we may not live the spirit of the commandment, because we may not kill anybody, but every day we may speak evil of our brothers and sisters. How common it is in our religious communities, 99%. Or, as Jesus says, even the way of addressing them, the way of talking to them, certainly does not reflect a true love. Because if anybody else would say the same things to us, most certainly we would not like them. So that is an indication that true love is not at work in those actions which don't reach as far as killing, but they are equally against the law of killing. In fact, if we want to continue to elaborate on that, even James in his letter talks about the evil that our tongue brings about, and in fact even our own present book reminds us so often that in our relationship we are led astray many times by these concerns for the others, instead of concentrating on what we should do, on how we should love, how we should follow the commandments. As we go to in this, the icon of the conclusion of this commandment is the one of reconciliation. We are all here now for the celebration of the Eucharist. Of course, Jesus was talking about the liturgy at the temple, where each one was offering various sorts of gifts, whether animal or vegetables or cake, baked samples or parts, and for each specific sin, for be it the sin of having misbehaved with somebody else, or not having followed ritual purities, or not having followed any other commandment. So the Lord tells them that it's more important the reconciliation with our brothers and sisters than even that gift, because the Lord would not accept that offering unless our hearts are purified first, unless we have reconciled with those people whom we have something against, not only, even reconciled with those whom we think they have something against us. So as you can see, it's a commandment at 360 degrees in every single aspect of our life. We must learn that God cannot accept us unless we have repented, we are reconciled with the others. And it's only then that He is happy that we come and bring our offering. As now, as Christians, we are celebrating this Eucharist by offering the bread and wine. That is a sign of offering our entire selves together with Christ, whose death and resurrection we reenact. But is God likely to accept us, to welcome us, unless we have repented and are reconciled? Well, according to what Jesus tells us, no. So let us improve that first. The second aspect deals with divorce. And again, this is connected, even this section is connected with what Jesus says in other parts about divorce, about the love of man and woman who are called to share their life to the full, and eventually to give a new life as a consequence of that relationship built up on love. And yet, if we look around us, where on earth this commandment is still kept? There is no country in the world where one can say, indeed, this is a commandment followed by the majority or a large percentage of population. Everywhere in the world nowadays, the people, men and women, go from one person to another. They say that relationship has finished. Love is no longer there. But was there love? Or did each person, each partner try to love to the full? And love means forgiving, giving oneself totally to the other partner, working together, planning together. Of course, when these things are not there, we can say that love is no longer there, but perhaps now has never been there. Because the individuals were not prepared to engage this life by two people with such a rapport, relationship. And of course, we can apply this also to our religious communities, even though we don't have just one partner, but we have a certain number of brothers or sisters whom we must relate to, whom we must serve, whom we must donate ourselves to, with whom we must build that communion that exists in God's Trinity. Unless we keep that in mind, then even ourselves cannot say that we have prepared that loving relationship in our communities. And finally, the swearing. Swearing in the sense of making an oath. I make an oath that this is so. Now, of course, the best reason for making an oath is to stress that we are telling the truth, as it is done in the courts still today. But the Lord tells us that certainly so, we must always tell the truth and not tell lies. But in fact, even the action of swearing sometimes leads us astray, and it tells us that it is better just to say yes and no, the truth, yes and no, and not engaging in other comments that may eventually entice us to lead us truly to say the false, because we are not prepared to admit certain things in our lives, in the lives of our communities. And so it tells us that very often it's easier and safer to say simply yes or no, to use a few words but true ones. And so in all these cases we see what the love that God expects from us must reflect in our actions, in our lives. We are called to give ourselves to Him in such a way that His wisdom may continue to shine in our actions, that His life may be reflected in our own lives, that our choices will be always for what is good, for what is in line with your teaching, for what reflects our love, which must reflect His